Many people go to their attorney saying, I have an uncontested divorce. And unfortunately, they don't. It's a term of art, but it's a pretty clear term of art. What an uncontested divorce means is that you and your spouse have not only agreed to divorce, but have agreed to all of the specifics that get involved in the divorce, right? If you have children, what does custody look like? Who's going to be able to make the final decisions on the 4 bundles of custodial rights? What does visitation or access to the children look like? If you're going to do alimony, how much, how long? For the property, down to the linens, right? Who's going to get what and when? So having an uncontested divorce means the attorney's job is solely to draft up the parties' agreement and to dot the I's, cross the T's to make sure that every document is correct, all the timelines are correct, all the processes are correct for the judge to sign off on it. There's no negotiations involved in a divorce. There's no strategy involved in an uncontested divorce. So the number of people who think they have an uncontested divorce is much greater than the number of people who actually have an uncontested divorce. A contested divorce is a term of art in law and basically means everything that is not an uncontested divorce. So a contested divorce could be somebody comes to an attorney and says, we have an agreement on child custody, on access or visitation. We have an agreement on alimony. We have an agreement on our cars. We have an agreement on our house. Oh, but we aren't really sure what we're going to do about our 2 rental properties. That is a contested divorce. There aren't many things to resolve, right? Good on you that you got all those things resolved. It's going to be a faster process. It's going to be a less expensive process, but it's still a contested divorce because it's not signed, sealed, delivered with a nice little pretty bow on it. So when you hear the attorney say you have a contested divorce, it doesn't mean that the sky is falling. It just means that there's still something else to be done with regard toward coming to an agreement with your spouse. It is far and above a great idea to have an uncontested divorce. You should try to have an uncontested divorce because they are way cheaper, right? And really it has to do with control and the desired outcome that you have. Uncontested divorce means that you've reached an agreement with your spouse on everything. And you can imagine that's simpler, more efficient, more economical, more your own result. Here's when you shouldn't have an uncontested divorce. When the balance of power is really off. When you are sacrificing things that you should not sacrifice if you had a different balance of power and ability to stand up for yourself. I'll give you an example that comes up often. One party will take custody and the threat is, well, I'll give you custody if I don't have to pay child support, if I have to pay less child support. That is an imbalance of power because the custody of the children should never be a pawn, right, that seeks an economic gain. So there's an example of it. Or you have a situation that really cries out for alimony because of the economic disparity, right? But if you want to get divorced from me, I will fight you unless you agree to no alimony. That's a situation where you probably ought to consult with an attorney and say, is this offer fair? Is this offer in my best interest? You can imagine that if the alimony was going to be $100 a month for a year, the attorney would probably say, that's $1,200? Yeah, you're going to spend a whole lot more than that in fighting this. I don't know why you would fight for that, right? So that's an extreme example. But just run the numbers. There will be a right answer somewhere. Check with an attorney to see whether or not it's more viable for you to come to an agreement with your spouse because the terms are within the ballpark of being fair, or this is ridiculous, dead on arrival, don't agree to it. When you're looking at a contested divorce versus an uncontested divorce, the difference between the two could not be more stark. An uncontested divorce is a done deal, right? You got to dot your I's, cross your T's. In the state of Georgia, for example, Georgia's good about staying out of the way of people making a decision to come to an end of their marriage, and you can have a final on an uncontested divorce within 31 days of filing what's called an acknowledgement of service, which is how the court knows that the defendant knows the case is going forward, right? So the defendant signs an acknowledgement of service saying, I got it, you don't need to serve me. The day that you file that in court, you start your 31-day clock ticking. So it's a little hard to think about, really? You're going to be divorced in 31 days? Yeah. Because the best practice then is you file that acknowledgement of service and you work out the rest of the agreement, if you guys are close, within the 31 days. You hit that 31 days, you give the judge a settlement agreement, a final judgment decree, and hopefully the judge's pile of things to sign is not so large. And oftentimes that day they'll sign off on it and you're done. A contested divorce is everything else, right? So you don't have an agreement and you don't know how long it's going to take to get to a place where you have an agreement, or if you can't come to an agreement, to where the judge will have time to make a decision on a final basis, right? You stretch that out, you could be talking about, as opposed to 31 days for an uncontested, a year or more in a contested, depending upon how far apart you are, how backlogged the judge is, how long the trial will take. So again, there's every reason to have an uncontested divorce if you can, but if the uncontested divorce terms are unfair to you, there's every reason to balance what's the time frame, what's the cost in going forward, rather than coming to an unfair agreement. So if you are contemplating, facing, confronting a divorce, and you're thinking, maybe we can come to an agreement, and you're thinking, but I don't know for sure that we can, talk to an attorney. Give us a call. Let's work through that, right? Because you could save yourself tens of thousands of dollars. You could save yourself a tremendous amount of heartache. As is so often the case in divorce, strategy is the key. There are many ways to get people to come to the table and come to an agreement. There are many ways to structure a case if it has to go to trial to where it's much more advantageous for you. So when you're thinking, which direction am I going? Give us a call. Let's work through it. We can help.